0.43 centimeters. Bria had 14.3 millimeters. So those are in agreement. Alex and Bria, 13.4. So we're in the right sort of range there, which is good. Couple threes, couple fours. And remember, when you print these things off, if the resolution's not great on your printer, it's going to be really hard to see where those lines completely line up. So on a test or something like that, it'll be fairly obvious where it is. 13.4s and 13.3s. Got some 14s, got some 13s. So I'm going to go back up to the top here and go back to number 1, and then we will kind of make sure we know what's going on. One really common mistake that I think a few of you made, and it's not just specific to you guys, just everybody makes the same mistake, is when we're looking at a caliper really closely, it's important to note that we want to measure where the 0 is. And the tendency is to think, there's this space here, so I'm going to measure where the front of the caliper lines up. But unfortunately, that's not how a caliper works. So what you want to always do is make sure you're reading where the 0 is. And you'll notice you'll be off by 1 or 2 millimeters. So we're going to always go with the 0, wherever the 0 lines up. So in this case, I have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I know I have 15, and then I'm going to figure out which one's lined up. So if I were to estimate where this 0 is falling, it looks like it's around 4 perhaps. If I look in here, it kind of looks like 4 is lined up the best. So I would probably go with 15.4 millimeters or I'll write it down below here, 1.54 centimeters. Either one of those. That's just my estimation. Number 2, again, we're looking at the 0 and where it lands, not the front of the caliper. So we don't want to measure here. Sorry, I skipped right down to 3. We don't want to measure here. We want to measure where that 0 lands. Why would you go past the line to 0? That's a good question. You'll notice if I close this caliper, if you could imagine this piece just sliding all the way back over here, you'll see that this 0 is just a little ways away from the beginning. So if I were to close the caliper completely, I would end up with the 0 falling under the 0 here, and everything, the little scale is just kind of offset a little bit. Just kind of maybe a bit strange, but that's just the way that these things are designed. If you think about building something like this, if I wanted to start with a 0, if I had to actually print 0 and put it on this line here, half of my 0 would get cut off. So physically putting that number on the caliper just wouldn't work very well if I had to go with a 0 there. So as Damon was saying, it's just offset a bit. Back to the question, I have 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I know I'm at 19. It looks like I'm pretty close to the middle. And my 5 looks like it's off by just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and probably go with the 6 being the closest. So 19.6 millimeters. The 0 isn't past the 20, so we're just past this one here, which is 19. I haven't made it past the 20 yet, so the 0 is not past the 20. You got the decimal right, but we need to figure out where that 0 lands. So the closest number, the number it most recently passed was the 19. Let's go down to 3 and 4 and see if we can master this skill. So what's the last millimeter that the 0 passes? You can see I've gotten to 10 here, I've gotten to 11, gone to 12, and I'm just a little bit past 13. So in this case, it's 13. It's looking very, very close to 13, but maybe just a little bit to the right of it. So I know I'm looking kind of in this zone here. And if I look really closely, it looks like the 1 is lined up pretty well, but the 2 is just a little bit off to the inside there. So I'd go with 13.1, which many of you got. The last one, anybody want to change their measurements on the last one? See where my 0 falls. So I've passed 11, I've passed 12, I've passed 13. I'm just past 14. So I know I have 14. And then it's looking very close to the 14, not quite to the 15. So again, I'm looking kind of in this range here somewhere. If I had to estimate, I'd say it's probably in there somewhere. And then if I look closely, it's kind of looking like my 3 is lined up the best. So I would probably go with 14.3 millimeters. Now again, if you're off by 1 millimeter or something, or a 0.1 of a millimeter, it's likely not going to be the end of the world. But as the closer we can get, the better. So on tests and things, it'll hopefully be really clear. But in this kind of, you've printed it off, it's probably been copied a few times, whatnot. It might not be, perfectly in line. So we got to work with what we're given. So that's how to use a caliper. The other thing in the course is using the micrometer, which doesn't come up very often. I'll just bring up the little simulation here real quick. A micrometer is almost the same as a caliper, but it kind of measures even smaller things. So you can see that there's this dial here, and as I spin the dial, this little gap here opens up. So I could put something in here, and then I would take this dial and I would tighten it up until whatever I put in the gap closed. And then there's another little dial at the end, which is for really, really, really fine measurements. Now, this simulation isn't great because every time you move the micrometer, it's kind of jerky and it jumps around a lot, and it's really hard to follow what's going on. But it's kind of the same idea as a caliper. You're going to read the last little line you crossed, and then wherever on this scale that lines up with the very middle line here. Now, these questions don't come up very often, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. If you can, come in here and play around with it just to say that you've seen it before, that would be awesome. But don't feel like you need to spend your whole afternoon figuring out how a micrometer works, because they don't come up very often. So that is kind of where we're at. Now, I have a few minutes left. Probably not. I should probably just end it. I'm going to call it there. What I would like you guys to do for today is, if you haven't handed in the review, you got to get it in. So I'm going to lock that soon, so you can't hand it in anymore. It's only 3 marks. So make sure you get the review in. You need to make sure you've done this quiz by 3:30 today. So this quiz from yesterday's lesson. Nobody had any questions on yesterday's assignment, so hopefully you can have find some time to do that. Today I went through this lesson 2 worksheet. I would like you to do lesson 2 practice. The solutions and further explanation are all in here. There's the caliper simulation. If you want to play around with that, that'd be awesome. The caliper worksheet is what we did in class, so you don't need to worry about that. If you want to go back in, you can. There's tons of caliper examples online too, if you want to have a better look at that. I'd also ask that maybe you have a chance to go through the quiz this afternoon as well. That's putting us maybe 1 class behind where I'd like to be, but the next stuff that we do, this lesson 3 I've opened up if you want to look at it. We're going to do lesson 3 tomorrow. And lesson 3 starts to get into, you can see the lesson title here, surface area of triangles and right triangles and cones and things like that. So the surface area stuff can get a bit tricky just because the questions are a lot longer. There's a lot of steps involved. So I would very much like it if I'm going to insist you do the quiz number 1. I'm going to be really excited if you get quiz number 2 done as well today. And then if you want to print off the lesson 3 worksheet here, that would be awesome for next day, because we're going to go through that next day. And lesson 3, 4, and 5, so our next sort of 3 days, and 6, I guess, they're all a lot of sort of multiplication, a lot of steps involved, and they can get a bit tricky. So this measurement stuff's just kind of nice intro, and then the rest of it is a bit heavier in terms of the work and things like that. So it'd be nice to have a nice clean break today if we could get all this measurement, unit conversion stuff done, because the rest of this unit doesn't really have a lot to do with it. It's all shapes and geometry sort of stuff. So Taylor, hopefully that answers your question. Can you open them up? So you can put them in? Yes. I will open up the rest of the worksheets for the unit if you want. I'll open up everything. If you want to get ahead, that's fine. But let's do quiz number 1 and 2 for tomorrow, and practice 1 and 2 for those 2 lessons. And that's it. It's 11:25, so I've taken my hour up. If you want to fire some questions into chat, I'm going to go back to my office or even into Moodle and be able to answer your questions there. But if not, if you can get those quizzes done for tomorrow, we'll go into lesson 3 tomorrow. So thanks everybody for signing in. Hopefully we figured out how to use a caliper today and convert from metric to imperial. That's kind of where we're at. So we'll see you all tomorrow.